In my video yesterday, I reviewed my personal top 10 new series Doctor Who figures. And those that saw it will understand that when Doctor Who returned to our screens in 2005, Character Options picked up the license and started producing many figures. The line was very strong and very successful and would run consecutively for 6 years. For every season of the show, there would be a line of figures to go with it. That all changed after Series 6. And although the line has continued, it has been more sporadic in recent years. But if we rewind to those first 6 years of the show's return, which was undoubtedly the peak of Doctor Who popularity, you can definitely see the fun Character Options were having with the license, producing tons and tons of figures and all kinds of vehicles and playsets, and really capitalising on the brand for all it was worth. But sometimes, when a brand is really successful, when a line is doing really well, it can lead to complacency. And you can see an attitude developing of, well, if it's got a Doctor Who logo on, it's gonna sell. And so today, I'm going to be taking a look at some of the failures. I'm going to be taking a look at some of the real stinkers in the collection. In fact, these figures are so bad, in my opinion, I don't even own them. I never even pick them up, not even when they're in the bargain bins. And I actually still don't have these figures to date, so I'm going to be relying on stock photos that I found online. Okay, so let's get started. In at number 10, we have the 11th Doctor in a straitjacket. This is based on a very brief sequence in episode 2 of the 6th series. It's so brief, it's barely memorable, and it's not the most exciting scene in the world either. It hasn't got tons of aliens in, it's not a big action sequence, it's not something that I would imagine most children are going to want to recreate in their play. This figure comes from the final wave that we'd get with Character Options doing regular series by series figure releases. And I think they were actually really scratching the barrel when it came to this series. I think there wasn't a lot of toy-friendly content in the show that they were able to adapt in time to put out on the shelves. So I think when they saw, okay, we've got an 11th Doctor variant, Doctors sell very well, this is a legitimate variant we can get out there, let's do it. But I don't think they thought it through, and at the end of the day, toys around insane asylums and people being put in straitjackets aren't the most child-friendly, and they're not the most fun. And to make matters worse, he's also got the beard, and this just couldn't look anything further from the 11th Doctor. It just does not look like Matt Smith. It's just not right. They would go on to use this head sculpt again with the beard and put him on the 11th Doctor's body. Again, this is something we see very briefly in the same episode, and yeah, this was always going to be a peg warmer. At number 9, I think we have the original peg warmer for this series, and it was, of course, Laszlo. Now, on the face of it, I can understand why Character Options decided to run with this figure. Laszlo, of course, is a significant character in the story that is the Daleks in Manhattan. He is a kind of monster, he's sort of halfway there, so in terms of the alien look, I think, makes sense. And as a figure, it's not bad. The paint apps are relatively well applied, and the articulation's pretty strong. So what happened? Well, I think it's a combination of a couple of different factors. First off, Laszlo's not the most exciting character. It's not the most charismatic character that we see on screen in that story. A story that has a lot going on. We have Dalek Sec, and we have Dalek Thay that had some of his paneling removed, and of course we had the hybrid Dalek, and of course we also had these pig guards as well. Now, the pig guard was available exclusively through a set that you had to buy, and I think, whether you love or hate this story, as a child, if you're playing with a toy, this is definitely the better one. And then of course you throw in the fact that this story isn't generally very well regarded. A lot of people really didn't like it. And then Laszlo just looks kinda dull and a bit silly, and yeah, not a very exciting figure. And speaking of dull, next up we have young Amelia Pond. Again, on the surface, I understand the thinking behind this. This version of the character shows up several times throughout Matt Smith's run, and it wasn't exclusive for the Doctor Who experience, so it's just an added little bonus there, a little incentive for fans. And of course, I can see why a fan might want this. Obviously, it's an important character, it's rare, it's quite difficult to get hold of, and that's despite there being a variant as well. But honestly, when you look at this toy, who but an obsessive adult collector is going to really want to pick this up? I don't think this has marketability for children. There's no action features, there's not much in the way going on in terms of accessories apart from that suitcase there, and it's quite a dull looking figure. It doesn't scream excitement. It's also about 2/3 the size of a normal figure in this range. And I think the likeness is pretty horrible, all in all. I just don't think it's a very good likeness of the actor, and it just doesn't have anything to sell it to me. It really doesn't. And, you know, I am obviously a mad obsessive collector, and I try to buy everything, and, you know, I've got huge collections, and I fully appreciate army building and filling out your collections with all characters, but honestly, I feel no desire to pick this up. It just feels like a waste of space on the shelf. And come on, it's Doctor Who. You know, the line should be about fun and aliens and monsters and, you know, exciting things. And a little girl with her luggage case isn't really doing it for me. That said, character options can always find the most obscure and slightly boring characters they can to fill out a line. As we see at number 7, we have Dr. Constantine. So this figure's great if anyone's ever had to scratch that itch of wanting to own a Victor Meldrew figure. But for everyone else, this figure feels a little bit like it's scraping the barrel. Ultimately, this character is only a supporting character in the episode, and hasn't gone on to make a lasting impression in the consciousness of Doctor Who fans. And I think the primary audience for this toy line, of course, is kids, so I'm not sure how many would be mad keen to get hold of an action figure of an old man. I mean, yeah, it comes with an extra head that is the gas mask head, so it's technically a monster, but I don't know, it doesn't scream playability to me, and I can't imagine many kids scrambling to try and get this off the shelf. But the funny thing is, character options would go on to repeat this again just a couple of years later from the Series 5 release of Professor Bracewell. Again, this is another older man in a white lab coat. The only difference is that this time around, they would actually include a lot more action features, and so there's a more fun element to him because he is a bit of an android. And having the ability to swap the arms and the chest plate there makes a huge difference and impact on the play. And let's face it, even as an adult, that's just a lot more fun. At number 6, we're starting to see a bit of a theme, because for the second time on this list, we see a pig. This time, of course, it is the space pig. Maybe it's just me, maybe I'm a bit biased, maybe I just don't like pigs as aliens, but I think of this as being one of those strange comical releases, really, from character options. Now, for context, as you can see, this basically was a pack-in with the Slitheen figure. The Slitheen had already been released, and they decided to re-release it a bit later on, as more of a deluxe figure, and they packed in the space pig as well. I mentioned in my previous video that I really despised the Slitheen. I didn't like that episode full stop, and I really don't like that alien. That said, I did think the figure was absolutely fantastic, and it's on my top 10 as one of my favourites. But the space pig? Oh, come on, it does feel a little bit like they're taking the piss. Are there really that many children who are clamouring to get hold of this thing? Even in the show, its very, very brief appearance in the show is purely for comedy and for misdirection. And it looks awful because it's supposed to look awful. So I think you have to give character options top marks for having balls to go ahead and release this figure, because honestly, it's so bad. At number 5, we're back to the odd and boring characters. So here we have Hawthorn, again from Series 5. And honestly, I was scratching my head as to who this character even was. This is from the episode The Beast Below. It was Matt Smith's second episode, and not one I've ever seen twice. This figure is pretty much exactly what he looks like in the packaging. It's, again, an older guy with glasses, but instead of a lab coat, he's got a big cloak. And that's it. That's your lot. He has some articulation, he comes with a hood, but nothing else. I honestly can't remember this character, and maybe, just maybe, he's prominent and very important. I'm sure he must be to end up with his own figure, but yeah, he hasn't stayed in the memory for me, and I can't imagine again that many children were keen to get out and pick this figure up and have adventures with the Doctor and Hawthorn. To me, it's a pretty drab looking character, and there's very little of interest really, so there's nothing to incentivise me to pick this character up. Now, oddly enough, they also did Peter the Winder, or the Winder, and straight away, it's pretty much the same body mould, and, you know, you think you're getting the same experience here. Why would you want two in this wave? But to be fair, in Peter's favour, this actually has an interesting action feature. He can actually rotate his head around, so that's a bit more fun for kids, and, you know, doubles as a monster. And I totally get why character options would want to make a figure like this. That definitely ties into what you think of Doctor Who. It's still not the most exciting alien monster in the world, but it's certainly better than just a guy in a cloak. In at number 4, and just to shake things up, we have Grandma Connolly. So just when you thought you'd had enough of old men action figures, now you can throw in some old women as well. Honestly, I'm not quite sure I know what character options are thinking with this, other than that they could just sell anything. The idea of having an action figure of Grandma Connolly is pretty funny to me. Again, I really struggle to imagine many children rushing to the toy shop, having a whole range of Daleks and Cybermen and Doctors to choose from, and they see this and go, oh, that's the one I want. Sure, it does come with the wire, and I quite like that. And I like that, obviously, it does have a changeable head, so you have the old woman head and then you have the blank expression face. But still, I do feel this is scraping the barrel. And again, this isn't even the first time we've seen this, because Character Options released a Series 1 Gelf Zombie. So Zombie sounds pretty cool, pretty exciting, except again, it is just an old woman. It's nicely done. I mean, I think the head sculpt is pretty well done, but yeah, it's a strange action figure, isn't it? It's an odd one for children to be playing with. Now, they did do a Build-A-Figure a few years later, that was a lot more colourful and actually had like the spirit thing, and I get that. That makes that makes perfect sense. So if it had been a 2-pack with that included, would have been fine. I think as it is, it's just an odd thing to have in your collection. Okay, and by number 3, things are taking a turn for the truly awful. We have the Adipose. Around this time, there did seem to be a lot of love for the Adipose. We did see a lot of plush toys, and people seem to buy into the cutesy element of this character's appearance. But Character Options also managed to find a way to cash in, and yeah, I think again, you have to admire the on them for doing this. I love that they basically created a pack of 25 unposable, unarticulated, in-action figures. Yeah, to be fair, some of them have different molds, slightly different hand gestures, things like that, but overall, yeah, the sheer audacity is immense here. To think that you could put this out in place of an action figure and charge the same price as you normally would is extraordinary. And of course, to make matters worse, this was actually part of a Build-A-Figure wave as well, so if you wanted that Build-A-Figure, you had to buy this thing, and I just think it's it's almost daylight robbery. They would go on to release more Adipose, but they'd be a pack-in with other figures, so they found a way to re-release yet another 10th Doctor figure, but this time they packed in some Adipose to go with him. I don't mind this as much. I think, this isn't part of a Build-A-Figure, so no one's being held captive. I think if you haven't got a David Tennant figure in his suit or with the glasses, then you're getting the figure and you're getting something extra as well. So I don't think that's a bad thing at all, and this is a perfectly fair way of doing it. Now, I can only assume that this marketing strategy worked really well and they sold a ton of those Adipose sets, because a couple of years later, the cheeky would be at it again. Which brings me on to my second place, which is, of course, the Cybermats pack. And what's really funny about this set is on the box actually says fully posable. I mean, if that's not taking the piss at this point, I don't know what is. Now, again, to put this in context, this again was released in the Series 6 wave, so I think by this point, Character Options' fortunes were changing a little bit, certainly in their approach to the Doctor Who figure line. So whereas for Series 4, I do think it was a little bit of taking the mickey. Here, I get the sense there's probably more desperation. I just don't think they were given an awful lot of monsters or action figure material, really, to produce a wave of figures based on Series 6. There's not an awful lot going on with it that is toyetic in that particular season. So I think, they thought Cybermen pretty popular. They've obviously done tons and tons of Cybermen over the years. How do you do something different? The only new element, of course, was the Cybermats. So I think they just went for broke and thought, okay, let's just go mad with them. Now, that's all well and good, except that Cybermats by themselves aren't very exciting. Obviously, they've done their best to try and vary these out, so they have slightly different shapes to some of the tails, some of the positions they're in. Some of them have more of those grinning faces, others are just closed mouth. But really, a pack of 20-odd Cybermats isn't very thrilling when it's on the peg. as a pack-in, again, I think this works really well. So if you add them to a couple of Cybermen or to the Doctor or one of the companions, then absolutely, this is absolutely a fine thing to do for this wave. That would have been really cool. But on their own, they're just not a good sell. I mean, who wants to put down money for that? Okay, and in at number 1, the all-time worst, and I'm sure we can all say this together as fans, Destroyed Cassandra. Surely it has to be. This definitely represents character options at their most audacious. They took what I can only assume to be a very cheap, very simple figure to produce. It's not so much a figure because it has no action features whatsoever. It's more like a mini plastic statue, because it does not move in any way, shape or form. They managed to take that and find a variant. They found a way to sell it again. And the only way to do that was to give us a blood-stained smear on an empty frame. If you're new to the world of Doctor Who action figure collecting, I'm just going to let that sink in for a moment. If it sounds like a really strange idea, if it sounds like a terrible cheap cash-in, and if it sounds slightly gory, yeah, you're absolutely spot on. It's not just you. This is this is awful on all counts. First off, the original release wasn't that exciting. This is a character who showed up a couple of times in the very early seasons of Doctor Who, and even then, I don't think this works as a figure. Like I said, there's no action features, there's no articulation whatsoever. It is just a blank piece of skin that's stretched across a frame. That's not the most exciting thing to have in your collection. Granted, I get it, it is slightly alien, it is slightly monstrous, so you might want it for that kind of value, perhaps. I mean, again, would children want this? It's hard to imagine, but okay, let's just go there with it. Do you really expect people to go out and buy this this destroyed version where it doesn't even have the piece of skin? To me, this definitely smacks of hubris. This feels like a toy line who's, a company that's feeling very confident in their toy line, and feels like they can just stick anything out there and it will sell, as long as it has the right branding on it. And I don't know how this figure sold. I don't know if it's a peg warmer or not. I have to imagine it was. But again, the sheer audacity of character options to go there and put this out is hilarious. It's the kind of thing where you can imagine people sitting around a boardroom and thinking up ideas, the cheapest possible way to sell something with just literally packaging. And you can almost imagine them sitting around thinking about season 5 and the Vincent and the Doctor episode with that invisible monster, and thinking, hey, why not just put an empty package out there and say that it's an invisible monster? It's that sort of level of cheekiness that we're talking about here. And I actually think this might actually be the cheekiest release I've ever seen from any toy line of all time. As fans, we've all seen mad things to our various franchises, really strange releases, odd tie-ins, really strange variants, things that had no business being mixed together with some of our favourite characters, and yet, we got figures from these things, or just really terrible likenesses, or whatever it might be. We've seen some terrible botches in our time, but I challenge anyone to come up with anything that comes near to this. Now, to be fair to character options, they did come up with an ingenious workaround. They actually did bother to re-release the figure, believe it or not, but this time with an actual action figure. So they did it more as a pack-in with Chip. Now, again, from my point of view, I don't really see that as being a massive seller either. I mean, I don't think the guy has any lines in any of the episodes he's in, and again, didn't make any impression on me whatsoever. The only thing I can say is at least it's a legitimate action figure, and it does make the pack a bit more appealing. If you're a fan, you might want to recreate this. Again, for children, I just cannot imagine any child wanting this in any shape, way or form. I mean, why? And the funny thing is, as I was compiling this list and having fun with it, going through, thinking which are the worst ones, I had a long list of about 20 figures that could have gone on here. And I was making my way through, and I had things like the Mox of Balhoun, and I had Idris, and the Face of Bo, and the first release of Captain Jack. I even had the Editor from the Series 1. But all of those, I could kind of see the logic behind it, and I could kind of see why people would be interested. Why would anyone be interested in the Editor? Again, probably not children, but I can see an awful lot of the fan base going for a Simon Pegg figure, why not? Likewise, Idris is the Doctor's wife. Again, from a fan point of view, I can definitely see why that would be interesting to have in the collection. Again, not so much for kids, but you know, there is a strong fan community out there, and I think that would still sell reasonably well. The Mox of Balhoun, well, at least, you know, it's a proper alien. Again, I get that. I get the appeal for a child. Might like to have that. I think as a figure, it's really lame. Like, it has very little points of articulation, and it looks kind of silly to me. But, you know, I do understand from a child perspective that that would actually be kind of fun. You might want that in your collection, definitely. So I get the thinking behind that. The first release of Captain Jack, I think is absolutely awful. I really can't stand the body they've used for it, the mould, and I don't like the head sculpt. I just think it's pretty damn weak, to be honest. And I think given that we've been given better versions later on, you know, it really shows when you compare the two. And the face of Bo, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are probably shocked at me putting that on this list because it's the face of Bo and what an amazing character it is, but honestly, is it? Is it really an amazing character? I mean, I think it's a big character. It's nice that it's a big deluxe figure, but it doesn't really do an awful lot. I mean, it does legitimately move its lips, I think, but other than that, it's pretty stationary and kind of boring. There's not an awful lot you can do with it. But again, I do fully appreciate that this is at least a big alien. It is a deluxe figure. It is something that might look quite cool in a collection. And again, put myself into, you know, a child's mindset. I can see that, you know, that will be kind of cool and exciting, at least for a few minutes. But Cassandra, honestly, no matter how you slice it, this is truly a diabolical release. I hope you enjoyed the vid. If you did, please do give it a like. And remember to subscribe, as I'll be posting more videos soon.